mask or physical distancing.
CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky warning the unvaccinated should still mask up, as should everyone in crowded indoor settings like public transit. President Biden saying,
"This is a great day for America in our long battle with coronavirus."
The president urging everyone who hasn't to get vaccinated. 116 million Americans are now considered to be fully vaccinated. Gasoline is flowing into the Colonial Pipeline again after being shut down for 5 days over a ransomware attack. But it's not trickling out the other end fast enough in several states where supplies are running low.
President Biden urged people not to panic buy gasoline and urged gas station owners not to price gouge. He said he's lifted certain regulations to help get refined product to stations more quickly, even as the Colonial Pipeline ramps back up to capacity.
And we're in a competition with China and the rest of the world to win the 21st century economically. And we're not going to win it in competing with an infrastructure that is out of the 20th century. We need a modern infrastructure.
He said his American Jobs Plan includes transformative investment in modernizing and securing critical infrastructure. Separately, he said he can't dictate to private companies how to increase their cybersecurity, only that they need to invest more to make their systems secure.
Fox's Jessica Rosenthal. Israel preparing for a possible invasion of Hamas-controlled areas of Gaza after more rocket attacks. The Israeli Defense Forces massing troops at the border and calling up reservists. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Gunfire in Providence, Rhode Island has left 9 people wounded, 3 of them seriously. Police say it's a turf war between rival groups. All of the victims, young men, younger than 25. Providence Police Chief Hugh Clemens.
It's unfortunate that young men in this community have no regard for life at times.
The chief says they have no suspects, but he believes many of the shooters are the ones in the hospital. Attorneys for one of the former Minneapolis police officers charged in George Floyd's death, suggesting the prosecution may have tampered with forensic evidence.
Court documents were filed by attorneys defending former Minneapolis police officer Tal Thao. They claim in May of last year, Hennepin County medical examiner Dr. Andrew Baker met with prosecutors and told them his autopsy showed no physical evidence that George Floyd died of asphyxiation. The attorneys allege that a few days later, former D.C. medical examiner Dr. Roger Mitchell called Dr. Baker to complain about his findings, saying, quoting here, neck compression has to be in the diagnosis. Shortly after the conversation, defense attorneys say Dr. Baker released his final autopsy, and sure enough, it said neck compression did contribute to George Floyd's death.
Fox's Trace Gallagher. 3 officers still face charges for failing to intervene when Officer Derek Chauvin restrained Floyd during his arrest last year. Washington State altering some of its drug laws.
Governor Jay Inslee signed a bill Thursday reclassifying possession of cocaine, heroin, and other controlled substances as misdemeanors punishable by up to 90 days in jail. The Democrats saying the measure will help reduce the disparate impact of the previous drug possession statute on people of color. The previous law made possessing those substances a felony, but the state Supreme Court struck it down as unconstitutional. The provisions making possession a misdemeanor expire in 2 years, giving lawmakers time to reevaluate how the policy is working. The new law also allows police to divert a defendant's first 2 offenses to treatment before getting prosecutors involved. Steve Rappaport, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3, Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. Go back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have My Cloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Half a day. This is Rocky Martinez, professional heavyweight MMA fighter. Nothing gets in my way when I go pro at Subway. Pack a punch with double the protein on any foot-long sub for just $2 more. For a limited time only. Subway. Eat fresh.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. The only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, even on the last day of the week. That's the way we start I start the program here, and it's the way I start it every day because this is a constitutionally oriented, conservative call-in radio talk show. And if you feel like calling in, if you want your voice to go out to our international radio listening audience, 888-TALK, 888-8255. And you can also post on Facebook. And a lot of times, if your post on Facebook is pithy, and I want you to notice I do not have a lisp, or clever, or it agrees with me, it very well may be broadcast out over the air to our international radio listening audience. So let's start out with Zemi Ikadni. We're about to see a white swan or a unicorn or something like that we theoretically know exists but never really haven't seen one for a long time. Here's the Daily News. Our view, get private management team to run new hospital. It's been clear for years that Guam needs a new hospital. Guam Memorial Hospital has been slowly falling apart. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers assessed GMH and recommended building a replacement facility. The estimated cost as much as $743 million, including $21 million in improvements necessary to restore accreditation. Governor Leon Guerrero plans to use $300 million from the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 to construct a new public hospital. While Delegate Mike San Nicolas has said the current administration would have to look very closely at how the funding is justified and may have to tie into the pandemic somehow, the governor has said she is confident the American Rescue Plan guidelines would allow for it. She is so confident that she's scheduled a closed-door meeting with the legislature to discuss it. And here's Lou's logic. It's very broad. It includes anything that's negatively impacted as a result of COVID. What is more negatively impacted as a result of COVID than the hospital facilities? Marine Corps Drive. You know, we should use some of that money to rebuild Marine Corps Drive, because the COVID virus settled on Marine Corps Drive, so it was affected. Yeah. Wow. Still being debated is from where the rest of the funding will come. While a need for a new hospital or health care facility is evident, what's also clear is that it's in the best interest of our community that the government of Guam shouldn't run it. For decades, Guam Memorial has failed to deliver quality, consistent health care for our island. It perpetually operates in the red, has had problems getting needed medical equipment and supplies, and failed to maintain standards for accreditation. It has a history of mismanagement, often by political appointees who lacked expertise, and it has routinely been a political dumping ground. Our community deserves much better. The best plan should be to work with the current private hospital, Guam Regional Medical City, to determine what part of our population can be handled there. Then, build a facility to address the gaps, including health education, and turn that over to a private company. We need to remove any tinge of politics from our healthcare system so the focus is only on providing the best possible health care, not whose or what agenda is being pushed. So while we look for a site for a new medical facility, how to fund it, and build it soon, we also need to look for the best private management team to run it so that the quality of public health care is very best it can be in our community. Yeah, I'm going to break with tradition here. I've heard enough. I'm quick on the draw with my blue pencil. And as I said, today we're going to see a white swan. The Daily News actually gets the coveted blue star. Yeah, way to go, Daily News. Keep it up. Now that you're finally back in the win column. And for the Daily Post. Yeah, just not up to Daily Post standards. More vaccination clinics offered as we march cautiously toward a post-pandemic Guam. Armed with more vaccines and approval to inoculate children ages 12 to 15, the local government and its partners have set up a series of clinics. This is another one of these news stories cast as an editorial. Here's the punchline. I'm going to skip the rest of it. As the island community is met with the flurry of clinics in the upcoming days, there is, at very best, a sense of hope that we're marching forward. And while Wuhan virus is a new reality, perhaps we're also on our way to figure out how to live with it. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's go from there to the card. And this is what I've got on the card. I've got the Pacific Daily News versus accuracy. Now, this has been on the card for a while under the headings Governor versus Non-Chamorros, Grijalva versus Guam, Moylan and Blas versus the U.S. Navy, woke being smart versus being smart, and Tina versus the truth. So this is all this hubbub about the insular cases. You remember the insular cases, those racist Supreme Court cases that caused us so many problems here, you know, like the brown tree snake, the rhinoceros beetle, traffic jams on Marine Corps Drive. No! If the insular cases were just repealed, no more brown tree snake, no more rhinoceros beetle, no more traffic. Yeah, that's kind of the way it's been spun. And the Daily News, just like with the Sunday Forum, the Daily News reporter knew the answer. So it didn't take him long to write his story because he knew the answer. Representatives from Guam appeared before Congress early Thursday. Representatives meaning Tina. Even in this day of singular they, Tina is only one person.
But when you hyphenate a name, it's hard to tell.
That's true. Who appeared for Guam? Well, let's see, there was Munya and Barnes, yeah. Morning to testify in the Insular cases, a series of U.S. Supreme Court rulings from the early 1900s that have been used to deny access to federal programs. No. You know, the first sentence, you show how stupid you are here at Daily News. Voting rights, no. Equal rights to people living in U.S. territories. U.S. House of Representatives Resolution 2279, the subject of the hearing, calls for the rejection of the Insular cases, which are, quote, based on a history of racial discrimination, which established a doctrine of separate and unequal for American citizens and nationals living in U.S. territories. So, you know, you just call up Michael Bravacqua, who's your columnist, and he'll give you this stuff, right? Former Guam resident and president of Equal American, Neil Weir, testified in support of the resolution. He spoke on behalf of his organization, which advocates for civil rights for U.S. citizens who reside in the territories. The group did not have a position on political status in the territories other than to support their decolonization, he said. And as usual, much of Neil Weir's testimony was about Neil Weir. Simply put, America has a colonies problem, and the reason is clear. As a consequence of the Insular cases, 3.5 million residents of the United States territories are treated as second-class citizens. Is what I mean by demographic. What's the word I'm looking for here?
Demagoguery?
Yeah, demagoguery. And he says, and sometimes even denied citizenship himself. Well, he was involved in the case in Utah where he was able to convince a court that people in Samoa are citizens by birth. Now, when I get to the testimony of the lieutenant governor of Samoa, you'll see why Pete and Repeat both say Neil Weir has a savior concept. They don't want citizenship. They don't want birthright citizenship.
Maybe he should have asked America Samoa first.
Exactly. The U.S. has fallen short of its commitment of self-determination and indigenous rights, Weir said. When asked by Representative Jay Obernolte of California what the next step would be should the resolution pass, he responded that action in the courts and Congress may be necessary, suggesting that maybe the resolution will be enough. I think having the Supreme Court review and overrule the Insular cases would be a strong step forward, turning the page on the Insular cases and this colonial framework. Weir said, for the political branches, a serious process and conversation about self-determination for the territories, such as a path to statehood or independence, or even a constitutional amendment would be needed. Now, this is the person who wrote this story. This is not one of the witnesses. Also testifying in support of the measure, not really. Tina didn't really testify in favor of the measure, was Tina Rose Munya Barnes, who recently introduced poisonous resolution in the 36th Guam legislature. Tina's resolution is even worse than Grijalva's resolution in Congress. She called on Congress to finally address the injustices perpetrated by the doctrine, calling attention to how the Insular cases have prevented Guam residents from availing of federal programs such as supplemental security income, Medicaid, and of course, that's not the Insular cases. And you'll see she followed my advice when she actually got before the committee. She said, can't you do something here? Now, Grijalva didn't chair the committee, didn't chair the hearing. He left that up to Khalili. What's Khalili's regular name? Saplan?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, the vice chair of the committee. The vice speaker raised the example of Katrina Schaller, who filed a lawsuit in District Court of Guam in 2018 after she was denied SSI benefits for a medical condition that severely limited her muscle function because of her residence on Guam. I guess her medical condition was because of her residence on Guam. That's the way the story reads. I'll try again. The vice speaker raised the example of Katrina Schaller, who filed a lawsuit in the District Court of Guam after she was denied SSI benefits for medical condition that severely limited her muscle function because of her residence on Guam.
There's a comma there. That's why.
Well, yeah. Her sister, her twin sister, Leslie, also had the condition, was able to live independently in Pennsylvania because of the benefits, Munya Barnes said. And this is all because of the Insular cases.
It's because of her residence in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. One of the battleground states, yeah. Efforts to raise Medicaid allotments to the territories and appropriations for Families First Coronavirus Relief Act were notable, Barnes said, but these are temporary measures and are set to expire, all because of the Insular cases.
Okay, how many paragraphs in and we still haven't talked about the Insular cases?
Exactly. Denouncing the Insular cases was the first step, according to Munya Barnes. The conversation needed to continue. While this resolution sends a strong message, she said, Congress can do more. It always could. Maybe she's been listening to tall tales. While this resolution sends a strong message, Congress can do more. It always could. Its plenary powers allow Congress to tailor-make a binding political status process unique to each territory. While all who testified opposed the racial language of the cases, some stated during the hearing that the flexibility provided by the Insular cases provided some possible benefits for some territories. Professor Rose Cuisan Villasor of Rutgers Law School appeared to say that the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause was limited with the situations of the territories. And I'll get into that with her testimony. A former CNMI resident herself, she said that the provision that only Northern Marianas, Chamorros, or Carolinians could own land in the CNMI would likely be struck down under the 14th Amendment, but was allowable through the Insular cases interpretations. Let's overrule the Insular cases. Lieutenant Governor, this is a tough one, Talawega Eleazlo Va'alele Ale of American Samoa, I'm just going to call him Ale from now on, supported the intent of the resolution but believed that all cases concerning the actual law of the Insular cases should be decided on the merits consistent with the Constitution and evidence presented in court. That's not what he said. He argued that each territory had a unique situation and any legislation should recognize that one size fits all would not work. American Samoa, for example, was the only territory that did not come under U.S. sovereignty as a result of conquest or sale. The only one that could control its immigration and customs. Are you listening down there at the legislature? Is the sound penetrating your locked door? And the only ones whose residents are not automatically U.S. citizens. We believe being patriotic non-U.S. nationals is not a second-class status. Are you listening, Neil Weir? But a unique first-class status. American Samoa's voice and message were extremely clear. He said, any change to political status and rights in American Samoa under federal territorial law should be decided by local elected leaders and their representative in Congress, not by federal judges. Exactly. And those who want the insular cases, actually Downs versus Bidwell, overruled because they think all of these wonderful things are going to happen, are embracing what's called critarchy, rule by judges. Now, a little later in the program, I'll show you how Congress could, by striking one syllable, not a whole word, but just a syllable from our Organic Act, would overrule the insular cases. Yeah, one syllable. All right, PNC also covered it.
Again, I find it amazing that that entire article only finally talked about the merits of the insular case in the last section.
Exactly. Exactly. So, PNC covered it. Covered it twice, actually. And then I have the testimonies. I actually watched it last night. You can go to YouTube and you can watch it. And it's worth watching it because it really debunks, so much of the garbage that's been floating around out here. I'm going to start out with Tina Rose's testimony. Now, the first page of Tina Rose's testimony is classic Tina Rose Munya Barnes. Probably we don't need to spend a whole lot of time on it. She, her third paragraph, my grandfather is the late Colonel Juan Munya. This is important. For whom the National Guard's headquarters, Fort Juan Munya, bears his name to honor his contributions to the U.S. Armed Forces during World War II. Not so. He was a colonel in the Guam militia, which was disbanded in 1936. And nothing in World War II. Yeah. I am also the proud wife and an Air Force veteran, the mother of an active duty guardsman, mother-in-law of an Air Guard veteran, a grandmother-in-law of a deployed Army soldier, of the owner of a really cute little dog named Poodle.
I was going to think that was real.
And then she talks about the Roosevelt and then what makes me proud to call myself an American is, et cetera, and go on and on and on. Same story. We'll go to this hearing about the insular cases, but we really don't want to talk about the insular cases. And then she says, the resolution sends a strong message, but it's non-binding on the courts. A resolution from the House isn't even binding on the Congress. It's not binding on anybody. We call ourselves the land of the free, but the insular allow the insular cases to set the precedent of jurisprudence. I would like to reflect on the testimony of your former colleague, my former congressman, and former president of the University of Guam, Robert Underwood. We are taking the first step by calling the insular cases for what it is. But this is where I need your help. As a local lawmaker, I cannot single-handedly change the relationship between the United States and its unincorporated territories. Members of this committee, I humbly urge you to exercise the plenary powers granted to you to make right by the people of Guam. You all have made strides by temporarily granting Guam parity with our fellow Americans by raising Medicaid allotments and increasing the federal Medicaid rates through FY 2020 appropriations and the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act. But these are temporary and set to expire. While I am also grateful for the numerous relief packages passed by this body and the continued advocacy of Mr. San Nicolas, who wasn't at the hearing. No.
Interesting.
Or maybe he got smart. Maybe he listens to tall tales.
He was baking cookies.
The requirement for a local match in a time when our main economic driver, tourism, at a standstill, I echo our Governor Lourdes Leon Guerrero's sentiments, which I've heard her utter numerous times in closed-door meetings. This high match requirement has prevented us from availing of much-needed federal funds. Yeah, so insular cases, right? I also had the honor of hearing from Attorney Rodney Jacob, who hails from Chairman Grijalva's district of Arizona and represented Katrina Schaller. And he tells about the Schaller twins, which we all know about, right? In fact, I said that Rodney must have been the luckiest plaintiff's attorney ever because he had an ideal plaintiff, twin sisters, same malady, different application of the law. Makes it really easy to see. So we're all familiar with that. And Tina, of course, trotted it out again at the hearing here about the Schaller twins. As Attorney Rodney Jacob, who serves as Katrina Schaller's counsel, eloquently stated, it's contrary to common sense, human decency, and sound policy to deny public benefits to all other American citizens with disabilities living on Guam. I could probably agree with that, yeah? And let's, human decency, sound public policy, etc. Insular cases, no. While Katrina won her case in the District Court of Guam last June, the U.S. federal government has appealed to the Ninth Circuit, which has paused the case pending the outcome of a similar case from Puerto Rico, which will be heard by the Supreme Court. As a result of this shocking injustice, and at the request of my colleague, Mary Camacho Torres, who is the daughter of Guam's first elected Republican governor and founder of the Republican Party of Guam. That's true. He was. But what so again? What? Yeah. So what? Who was also a really good shortstop in Little League Baseball and washed his own car every Saturday morning. Yeah. I was honored to amend my resolution to seek parity on this matter, her Resolution 57. Senator Torres and I may hail from different political parties, but for our people, we can work together for our people.
Behind closed doors.
Oh. It's just, you know, if I'd have been there, I would have gone through a whole box of Kleenex, I'm sure. Going back to the testimony of Dr. Underwood and echoed by our governor, the legal scholars and community advocates, I would like to humbly further request this committee that Congress further exercise plenary powers to begin the process to correct this wrong. Congress could begin the process of creating a binding political status reconciliation process tailored for. We had to wait this long to ask for this. You know, we're too busy with tomorrow's self-determination and all the rest of this gigantic time waste. And of course, maybe the reason is that the separatists really don't want this. Maybe they don't want an end to their gravy train. Again, If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Quit screwing around with UNPO, the United Nations, the rapporteurs, etc. If you want something, go to Congress and ask. I also received testimony from human rights lawyer and scholar Julian Uggen, whose support for Resolution 279 was far more qualified than the other expert witnesses. Experts. Well, that's good to know. He wasn't even there, but he's more qualified than they are. Well, he denounces the racist and imperial origins of the Insular cases. All right. If you actually read Downs, imperialist, yes. Racist, no. Attorney Uggen argues that they nevertheless provide the basic analytical framework that later federal courts have used to protect the indigenous people of the territories, in particular peoples of the CNMI and American Samoa. Yeah, so what's the problem? He agrees that in certain cases, like Wabble versus Villa Crucis and Tuawa versus the United States, the Insular cases were not used as a sword, but instead as a shield. For instance, for all the flaws, the impracticable and anomalous test which developed out of the doctrine flexibility created by the Insular cases has been used to ward off challenges to things like ancestry-based alienation restrictions. Without the doctrinal space created by these cases, programs like these would have almost certainly been struck down. In sum, Attorney Uggen argues that in our zeal to condemn these cases, we cannot ignore the fact that in more recent times, they have been repurposed to benefit the indigenous people in the territories. Now, this wasn't part of Tina's oral testimony, only her written testimony. Okay, let's take a short break.
All dads should own a Traeger. And this Father's Day, you can win a Traeger smoker grill for your dad and feast on flavorful wood-fire crafted meals. Cooked with a flip of a switch. Cook low and slow or high and fast with digital precision on your Traeger pellet grill. Purchase $35 or more in fuel at 76 Circle K and enter to win. Gas up today and join Circle K's Father's Day package giveaway. A Traeger smoker grill, a canopy, a cooler full of meat, and 2 cases of Bud or Bud Light are up for grabs only at Circle K. Conditions apply. Visit 76CircleKGuam.com.
Top End Pest Control is who you call for all your pest control needs. Got a problem with roaches, ants, spiders, rodents, fleas, ticks, termites? No problem. They do it all. Top End Pest Control is a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business and HubZone certified. Serving Guam since 2012. Call them today for a quote, 487-5657, or email topendpest@gmail.com. Check them out on Facebook at Top End Pest Control and give them a like. Top End Pest Control for all your pest control needs.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Yeah, finally, Uggen argues that until we are willing to do the much harder work of reconstruction, that is establishing an alternative doctrinal path to protect the indigenous peoples of the territories, just denouncing the Insular cases is not nearly enough. Yeah, that didn't stop you from coming up with your poisonous resolution, did it, Tina? In closing, I would like to reflect on the U.S. Navy report on Guam. It outlines that the Navy was tasked with being an administrator of Guam simply because of our geographical location and its importance to the Navy. The Navy outlined its mission in a tone similar to the Insular cases, by stating in little less than 49 years, the naval administration of Guam had guided a people from illiteracy, peonage, and apathy to where, in conservative estimate and appraisal, it had been educated to accept and intelligently to discharge the responsibilities as well as the privileges of citizenship. You can't say things like that. Now, the fact that it's true You know, the noble Chamorros, and I went through that report the other day, right? And if you read the report, if you understand how the Spanish administration treated the local people, peonage, she probably doesn't even know what peonage is. But it was basically, we had a subsistence economy here. If you wanted a pair of shoes, you made your own pair of shoes. There was almost no economy. Everything was set up to service to provide service to the Spanish administration. So what the Navy report says is correct. It went from, you know, an unhealthy subsistence economy to 1950, a semi-prosperous community, and look what's happened since then. Now, more really important stuff here. Enough about the insular cases. Let's get back to the really important stuff here. I look at my entire career as an athlete, as an investigator, as a director, and a senator for 15 years. I have lived a full life. I'm not going to go near that. That would be a job for Jimmy if he were still part of the show.
A fool's?
Full.
Oh,
yeah.
oh.
Yeah,
Foul?
you remember the time Jimmy said, you know, when Tina was a little bit down in the dumps, somebody said, you should tell Tina, keep your chins up, Tina.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that? Yeah. For me, my goal now is to make sure that my children and our future generations are no longer subjected to these injustices, which apparently is the injustices she outlined: SSI, Medicaid, and highway funds. That's the only injustice she really underlined. I ask you today, I guess I cut the page off too short. That's enough of Tina, right?
Couldn't have cut it off any shorter.
Yeah, that's enough of Tina's testimony. So Tina did exactly what I suggested that she do. That she go to Washington, sit in front of that committee, and tell them that they have the power to straighten out all of these things that they want to blame on the insular cases. Okay, next I'm going to go to Samoa. And this is a statement from Mr. Ale. Okay, and this is what I'm going to skip the introductory paragraph. Currently, the people of American Samoa have a degree of self-determination and have a voice and a way of protecting our culture and way of life. This arrangement preserves our traditional Samoan way of life, or Fa'a Samoa, including communal land ownership, cultural traditions like prayer curfews, and that most of our island's land should stay in the hands of persons with Samoan ancestry. American Samoa has been a territory since 1900. However, we are not U.S. citizens, but rather non-citizen U.S. nationals. We cannot vote or run for office in the incorporated U.S. or hold certain U.S. government positions. There is a unique difference between American Samoa and the other U.S. territories in that those persons native to Guam, Northern Marianas, Puerto Rico, and Virgin Islands become U.S. citizens at birth pursuant to congressional action. In December of 2019, U.S. District Court Judge Clark Waddups and the Utah District tried to change our non-citizen U.S. national status, ruling that American Samoans should have birthright citizenship. This is Neil Weir, your local savior. This decision was made without our people in American Samoa voting on the issue or exercising our right to self-determination. Persons born in American Samoa currently have a path to U.S. citizenship an expedited path if they leave American Samoa and reside in the States. Amada Radewagen was able to, their representative was able to do a short circuit naturalization process just for these guys. Ending application of the insular cases as proposed in 279 may well be the correct course for some territories. That could include territories that have democratically self-determined that the status of the people under the law of the insular cases is intolerable and must end immediately by legal mandate without agreed terms or conditions that define a new status other than unincorporated territory. Well, there you go, Melvin Wanpat. Why don't you ask the legislature to introduce a bill that says that we want the insular cases immediately inapplicable? That's what he says. This is not the case in American Samoa. Each territory has a voice through the local government and a voice in Congress to inform and assist Congress in the exercise of its powers to provide for local self-government in the territories under Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution, one that tailgaters are familiar with, the Territorial Clause. Our voice and our message are extremely clear. We want any change in our political status and rights under federal territory law to be decided by elected leaders in the local government, our people and our elected representative in Congress, and fellow members of Congress, not by unelected federal judges who we have no voice in nominating or confirming, who handed down the insular cases the last time Congress deferred to the courts on the question of political status of the territories in 1901. This guy's really got it together. Accordingly, we support the intent of the resolution to refute the expression of the racist attitudes. You got to say that, you know. Everybody knows that it's racist. So you have to say that. However, we believe all lawsuits and cases in federal courts in which the actual law of the insular cases is being challenged should be decided on the merits consistent with the U.S. Constitution, law, evidence, and facts presented in court. This is imperative and critical for American Samoa because of pending litigation in which the courts are being asked to change the political status of the people of American Samoa under federal law without local democratic self-determination supporting outcomes of litigation that are unpredictable and or unwanted. And the government of American Samoa filed in Weir's case. They opposed. Yeah.
And he still went through with it.
He still went forward with it. He had to save him. Yeah. I understand why lawyers representing plaintiffs in lawsuits involving U.S. birthright citizenship for persons born in American Samoa would like Congress and the Department of Justice to be unable to consider the history and meaning of the insular cases in adjudicating currently pending cases. That could mean the lawyers for clients who want court-ordered political status change would prevail because there would be less U.S. Supreme Court case law to oppose plaintiffs' legal positions. That is why lawyers are aligned with other special interest groups in current pending cases. Not to mention the fact that there's money to be made by these lawyers. These special interest groups have lost past lawsuits and are now asking Congress to change existing territorial law based on racist attitudes expressed by judges 120 years ago when the vast majority of Americans and the U.S. as a nation were openly engaged in systemic racism. We have no objection to repudiating the racist and immoral views adopted in the insular cases. Indeed, we join our fellow territories in doing so today. What we oppose is the wholesale rejection of these cases because we believe such action will have a lasting impact on the underlying structure of our political relationship with the U.S., the right of self-determination and consent of the governed. Yeah, okay, I got to take a short break here, and let's see, I've got... I got Mark. I'm not finished. I'm going to spend a lot more time on this, but I don't want to keep Mark on hold. So after the break, I'm going to get to you, Mark.
Hey, big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community. Get national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro in Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchase Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Okay, so here we are back just a few more minutes before the big halftime show, and I've got a caller on the line that wants to make his mark. Go ahead, Mark.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Doing great.
Hey, I got a question for you.
Sir.
On the twins case about the SSI being available to one and not the other, which one of them contributed to the SSI?
Well, SSI is not a contributory program, Mark. SSI is funded by general tax revenue. It's a means-tested form of welfare. So that means that only people with under certain income limits are eligible, and it's paid out of the U.S. Treasury. Now, the reason that Congress didn't extend SSI to the territories is, guess why? We don't pay into the Treasury.
Exactly. That's my clarification.
Yeah.
So one is in Pennsylvania, which is contributing into the Treasury. One is in Guam, which isn't.
Exactly.
So if Barnes is using that as one of her arguments, that's like a dog arguing with a hose.
True enough.
You're never going to have a clear winner.
And from the beginning, I've said, since she came up with her poison resolution, I said, these are not matters that arise from the insular cases. This is Congress. So if you want it done right, go to Congress, which is exactly what she did. She said, give us parity here. You don't have to overrule the insular cases to do that.
Yeah, and I'm still waiting for someone to turn around and say, well, if Congress can't do it, they're going to take it to the UN. The UN is one of the most worthless organizations in the world.
That's for sure.
In my opinion.
Absolutely, Mark.
In my opinion, that's a waste of money.
It is.
You know, because they're on one side trying to tell countries how to run themselves when they are totally hypocritical about the situations that they encounter.
Exactly.
You know, and another thing on personal experience concerning American Samoa.
Yeah.
I was stationed with an individual from American Samoa. And we're talking about birthright citizenship. Okay, he waited until he was 18. He wanted to join the military. The only way to join the military is he had to become a citizen. So he did it by choice. Okay, if you were born in Samoa, it doesn't matter American or the other side, you're Samoan. The choice was given to the individuals when they became of age. It wasn't forced on them or anything like that. So they chose to be American citizens. Like you said, expedited pathway to citizenship. So when someone turns around and starts saying, I mean, even the government of American Samoa said, no, we don't want it, but yet they pursued it. you're right. The lawyers wanted to make money, but when you have the government or someone trying to talk about the government saying they want this, but the people don't want it, like what's going on in the States, then, you got 1% of the people trying to make a decision that they think is right for the other 99%.
Yeah.
So he is a proud American citizen, retired U.S. military.
Yeah.
But he's also a very, very proud Samoan. And if you ask him, he's not going to tell you he's an American. He's going to tell you he's a Samoan who happens to be a U.S. citizen.
Yeah. Correction, Mark.
And that's.
I want to set the record straight here on something. A person doesn't need to be a United States citizen to enlist in the U.S. military. You have to be a citizen to be a commissioned officer, but not to enlist. So he may have enlisted and naturalized, in the process of doing that. But
no, he actually got naturalized before he joined.
Okay.
We were talking about that because he said that was one thing he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And plus, it was away off the island.
Sure.
So, back in the 80s, people make decisions like that.
Right.
But the thing about this is, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, all right, their arguments, for some odd reason, only make sense to them.
Yeah.
It don't make sense to anybody else, but because it's their argument, their point to make, if you go against that argument, then you have something wrong with you.
Yeah, well, we have a kind of an establishment here, the separatist establishment, many of whom are drawing checks from the government of Guam, who keep beating that same drum. My suspicion is they probably don't even want to be successful. They just want bitching rights. But anyhow, Mark.
Yeah, but
go ahead.
Well, something to point out. Where are those separatists now with all the COVID money we've been getting from the states?
Yeah, I know. I suspect that 95% of them, when they got their CARES Act checks in the mail, they went down to the nearest park and burned them, ceremonially burned them like people used to burn their draft cards, right?
Yeah, I'm like, okay, you complain about this, you want to be separate and all this good stuff, but when the money comes in, oh, no, not today, we'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay, Mark, well thanks for
get some clarification.
Thanks for chiming in, Mark. And let's see, I got somebody else who wants to beat the clock here before the big halftime show. Can't do it. Okay. All right, just a few more minutes here. I'm going to see if I can wrap up American Samoa. Ali's testimony says each territory is unique and any new legislation should recognize the history of the individual territories and their relationship with the U.S. and Congress. A one-size-fits-all approach will not work. Now, let's go back to the headline here. Guam and territories appear before Congress to oppose insular cases. Not the guy from Samoa. He says, leave it alone. Don't you even dare think about touching it. All right, let's break for the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Quiet for now. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. It's morning in Gaza. Quiet for now after days of violence between Hamas and the Israeli military. Smoke still billowing from some of the buildings hit with Israeli airstrikes in retaliation for Hamas rocket attacks. While Israel warns it is making preparations for a possible ground assault, gathering troops at the Gaza border. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the U.S. continues to urge both sides to de-escalate.
We believe that Israelis and Palestinians deserve equal measures of freedom, security, dignity, and prosperity. That recognition will continue to drive our approach.
It is also the start of the three-day Muslim celebration marking the end of Ramadan. A big policy change from the government on fighting the coronavirus.
If you are fully vaccinated, you no longer need to wear a mask.
But President Biden says that only applies to the 116 million Americans who've gotten the required shots at least 2 weeks ago. For everyone else, the masks stay, also recommended in medical settings and in transportation. Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz telling Fox's America Reports.
We should be following the science and not playing politics. And from the beginning of COVID, there's been far too much politics connected to it.
Senator Cruz says he mostly stopped wearing his mask weeks ago after getting vaccinated. There's been a mass shooting in Providence, Rhode Island.
9 victims, 8 men, 1 woman, 3 of them in critical condition. Police say several dozen rounds were fired by as many as 4 or 5 guns in what started as a drive-by shooting. Police underscoring that this was a targeted incident, not random, and that the groups involved are well known to authorities.
Reporter Kim Kalunian of Fox 12 in Providence, the police chief, says this is probably the biggest shooting in that city's history. America is listening to Fox News.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. We're back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have MyCloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Some progress is reported in talks toward a federal infrastructure bill.
President Biden is signaling Memorial Day as a deadline to find progress on a bipartisan infrastructure package.
I laid out what I thought we should be doing, how it should be paid for.
The president described a 90-minute meeting with several Senate Republicans as very good, indicating a good faith effort. West Virginia Republican Shelley Moore Capito agreed.
I think we all felt that he was an honest broker here in terms of wanting to actually do something together.
Republicans have put forward a nearly $600 billion alternative to a nearly $2 trillion package proposed by the president. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Also pushing for immigration reform, the president will meet today with 6 so-called dreamers, immigrants who'd been brought to the country illegally as children. A former Army Green Beret who admitted divulging military secrets to Russia over a 15-year period will be sentenced later today on espionage charges. Peter Debbins could get 17 years in prison. His lawyer pressing for a lighter sentence, saying Debbins' actions only caused minimal damage and that Russian agents had blackmailed him by threatening to expose his sexual preference. An active duty U.S. service person is now among those charged in January's Capitol Hill riot.
Major Christopher Warnegiris has been stationed at Marine Corps Base Quantico since last summer. He was arrested in Virginia Thursday. Prosecutors say Warnegiris was seen on camera scuffling with a police officer and helping others force their way into the Capitol. Charges include assault and obstruction of justice. More than 400 people have been charged so far in the siege. Among them are 4 members or reservists of the National Guard and about 40 military veterans. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
Lightning is believed to have killed a herd of 18 wild Asiatic elephants in a remote section of northeastern India. The elephants, including 5 calves, were found dead during heavy rains in the protected Kandali Forest Reserve. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Half a day, this is Honey. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more global markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated teams in Guam, Saipan, and on U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Half a day. This is Rocky Martinez, professional heavyweight MMA fighter. Nothing gets in my way when I go pro at Subway. Pack a punch with double the protein on any foot-long sub for just $2 more. For a limited time only. Subway. Eat fresh.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro in Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Just some interesting information here about American Samoa. American Samoa, we are the only one of the 5 insular territories that did not come under U.S. sovereignty as a result of conquest of or sale by a European or Asian power. We are the only territory that controls its own immigration and customs system. We're the only territory that selects parts of its legislature through customary means. We're the only territory that prohibits alienation of most of its land. We are the only territory whose residents are not automatically U.S. citizens at birth, and we prefer to keep it that way. We believe being patriotic non-U.S. citizen nationals is not a second-class status. Where are you out there somewhere? Not a second-class status, but a unique first-class status. So, interesting enough, the reason that American Samoa is now a U.S. territory is because in 1900, the Samoan chiefs got together and ceded their island to the United States. Yeah, well, but I'll bet you Bavakwa just really likes the sound of that. How could anybody do that? Next, I've got Rose from the CNMI. And I got to look something up here in just a second.
Wasn't she one of the people who testified during Tina Muna Barnes'
she was.
panel? Or she was a panelist? Yeah.
She was, yes. She was indeed. So this is Rose Cuisan Villasor, who is a professor at Rutgers Law School, New Jersey. And Rose was born in the Philippines but grew up in Saipan. And she's fairly knowledgeable about the Northern Marianas. She says she's all for denouncing the insular cases, going along with the whole racist bag. But then she says, second, let's go to her third point. Allow me to explain, having said above, allow me to explain my third point, which addresses my support for House Resolution, my support for House Resolution 279 is qualified. Despite the racist origins of the insular cases, it's important to recognize that these cases may be seen in a different light when viewed from the perspective of individuals who negotiated the political agreement known as the Covenant that established the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands in political union with the United States. In particular, the covenant provided that because of the importance of the ownership of land for culture and traditions of the people of the Northern Mariana Islands, and in order to protect them against exploitation and to promote their economic advancement and self-sufficiency, only persons of Northern Mariana's descent may own permanent and long-term interests in real property in the CNMI. Article 12 of the CNMI Constitution, in turn, defines persons of Northern Mariana's descent as a U.S. citizen or U.S. national who has at least some degree of Northern Mariana's Chamorro or Northern Mariana's Carolinian blood, or a combination thereof. For purposes of determining Northern Mariana's descent, Article 12 defines such person as full-blooded Northern Marianas Chamorro or Northern Marianas Carolinian if that person was born or domiciled in the Northern Marianas by 1950 and was a citizen of the Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands. I don't think you were here for the Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands, Jose.
I wasn't here, but that's how I remember them.
Because Article 12 restricts land ownership in the CNMI based on floodline, it would arguably be categorized as a racial classification and thereby be open to being challenged under the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. Of course, under conventional equal protection analysis, race-based laws are subjected to the most rigorous and exacting constitutional standard of strict scrutiny. I've explained that before. Strict scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, rational state purpose. Race gets you to strict scrutiny. So that section of the covenant should have fallen under the Equal Protection Clause. However, let's see, and she explains it. Strict scrutiny, which provides that for the law to survive, it must have a compelling government purpose and that the means employed is narrowly tailored to achieve that compelling government interest. Crucially, laws that are viewed as racially discriminatory are generally struck down. It's really hard to get past strict scrutiny. Article 12 faced such an equal protection challenge in the 1980s, but survived. In Wobble versus Villa Crucis, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit chose not to use traditional equal protection analysis, but instead relied on the insular cases to uphold Article 12's constitutionality. I discuss in detail the Ninth Circuit's analysis in Wobble in my California Law Review, which I've included in the written testimony, And in the interest of time, I will not revisit the court's analysis today. But as I explained in that article and subsequent writing, if Article 12 were to be challenged again today, and a court were to use equal protection analysis instead of relying on the insular cases, it would be struck down because it's race-based. As I explained in that article, equal protection jurisprudence today classifies blood quantum land laws along a political versus racial binary. Significantly, under this binary, courts have upheld laws that protect federally recognized tribes as non-racial political laws. By contrast, groups that are not federally recognized tribes have seen their laws struck down as racially discriminatory. The most recent Supreme Court that demonstrates the juxtaposition of race versus political laws with respect to indigenous people is Rice versus Cayetano, which you've heard me talk about, in which the Supreme Court struck down a blood quantum preference for Native Hawaiians as violative of the 15th Amendment. My goal for today is to prompt the discussion on the limits of equal protection analysis and my concern that courts are ill-equipped to address unique laws that are designed to promote the political and cultural rights of people of Northern Mariana's descent. While Congress would be correct in condemning the insular cases for their racism, it should also be mindful that the alternative here, equal protection law, might not also be as helpful in protecting the rights of certain indigenous people. And then she's included some other stuff here. So, American Samoa, no. Northern Marianas, no. Pacific Daily News, let me see if I can find that again. Guam and territories appear before Congress to oppose insular cases. So, find the shiny objects, right? The Schaller twins, racism, etc., but overlook the real important part of the story.
I am very interested in correcting language if it needs to be so, but I still have yet to see what's racist about the insular cases. They say it is a lot, but they haven't given any reference to it.
There is Ann Hattori's. Let me just take a second here to go into that. This is what Ann Hattori said on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. The United States flag is flying over these lands. So some people said, well, doesn't that mean that American laws apply? In 1901, the insular case is basically the judgment of the Supreme Court. The new territories were inhabited by alien, quote, alien races, and they may not be able to understand Americans' Anglo-Saxon laws, therefore the Constitution doesn't have to apply. She took that nationally. She didn't even quote the section of the insular cases that she's after. But I went into a pretty extensive analysis here. I probably don't want to spend that much time on it now, but yeah. Okay, this is the language she was trying to quote. Yeah, okay. This is the language she was trying to quote. If, starts out, if these possessions are inhabited by alien races differing from us in religion, customs, laws, etc. So she didn't even get the quote right, but the quote arises in this context. If I can find it here in my paper. It is a hypothetical statement. That's why it starts with if. And I'll bring it up on Monday.
It sounds, yeah. I'm just saying, it sounds like language they disagree with. Like it makes them feel bad.
This is the context. They're saying in the debate as to whether the revenue clauses should apply to Puerto Rico, whether the Constitution follows the flag. And they've got a rationale as to why it doesn't follow the flag, because it never has. And then, and arguing the point of whether it should or it shouldn't, they quote something from Chief Justice John Marshall, who talks about the American empire. And they said, you know, if in the future we want to grab another island somewhere, this may be what we're facing. So it's hypothetical. We're saying we shouldn't make the Constitution because this may happen. It's not talking about the people in the 4 islands that were conquered. And anyone who does more than a cursory reading would pick that up. You know, with court cases, you can't just read them. You've got to study them because they're heavy reading. And obviously, I'm one of the very few people that actually studied Downs, because that's where what the context is. I'll come back on Monday, and I'll lay that out just very succinctly.
One more real quick question, if I may. I know that there's something you want to get to, but this happened in the early 1900s, the insular case decisions.
Yeah.
Hawaii didn't become a state until 1950. Was Hawaii a territory?
Hawaii was a territory. The rule is this, that you know the status of acquired territories based on the peace treaty or the congressional action to admit the jurisdiction. So Hawaii was annexed through an act of Congress, and Hawaii was always an incorporated territory.
Oh, incorporated, got it.
Yeah. Alaska was always an incorporated territory, which then that's where birthright citizenship came from. Until Balzac versus Puerto Rico, there was no birthright citizenship in acquired territory, as you were in unincorporated territories. So Hawaii was incorporated. They paid U.S. income tax from the get-go. People living in Hawaii were subject to the draft to selective service. They didn't vote for president. They didn't vote for their governor. On and on. They had all the disadvantages and none of the advantages, which is what Tina and the gang want here. Okay, I got a break for the 7th inning stretch, and then I'm going to come back. Although I'm not finished here, I'm going to come back and give Repeat a chance to talk a little bit.
All dads should own a Traeger. And this Father's Day, you can win a Traeger smoker grill for your dad and feast on flavorful wood-fire crafted meals. Cooked with a flip of a switch. Cook low and slow or high and fast with digital precision on your Traeger pellet grill. Purchase $35 or more in fuel at 76 Circle K and enter to win. Gas up today and join Circle K's Father's Day package giveaway. A Traeger smoker grill, a canopy, a cooler full of meat, and 2 cases of Bud or Bud Light are up for grabs only at Circle K. Conditions apply. Visit 76CircleKGuam.com.
Hey, big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community. Get national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Okay, here we are, as you were, 7th inning stretch on Tall Tales, and I have a caller waiting in the green room who has a tendency to sometimes repeat himself. He probably won't do it this time, but I somehow lost my screen here. Here we go. Okay, repeat. What can you tell me about the Insular cases?
Well, I just wanted to comment, Uncle Bob. I've talked about this issue a lot. I made a comment, how come the Samoans get it, the Sinamai folks get it, but the Chamorros don't get it? Because we've been made weary of the Insular cases.
Okay.
But that's not my point. My point is, you know what presentism is?
Yes, I do, Pete.
And I think that's another dynamic at play here. We're talking about an opinion that is 120 years old. And the terminology back then, if we listen to it today, we might sound, horrified or we might be horrified by the words chosen. Look at right now, the different evolution of the term for an African American, right? Throughout the years, they were called Negroes, coloreds, then blacks, and then now African Americans. It's just
Afro-American in there too, Pete. Yeah.
Yeah, Afro-American. All right. So people hear these things from 120 years ago and they get upset. You've been repeating that, there's nothing racist about the opinion in Downs. I agree, and I look at it differently. I take the CNMI point of view that, this opinion was protecting the natives. It was saying, and this is where I'm going to repeat myself, if we find folks living in these territories, we ought not to shove our traditions down their throats, which, is kind of conflicting with a lot of the people nowadays complain that the Americans eradicated or erased the culture and the traditions and supplanted it with Western traditions and culture, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what the Insular cases was trying to protect against. It was trying to protect against Americans going to other places, grabbing territory, and then shoving Western ideas down their throats. So what is it? Do you not want to be Westernized, or do you want to be Westernized? So there's an internal conflict there that's going on. If you're upset that our culture has been supplanted by Western culture, but then you're upset about the Insular cases, you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, let me talk a minute about presentism for our audience. Presentism means that you look at historical facts and you apply today's judgments and morals and ethics to historical facts. And if what was done historically doesn't match up with the way we think today, obviously it was wrong. And that
right, and a lot of that has to do with the language too that's being used.
Yeah.
Language can stir certain emotions, and you gotta, if you want to think and analyze this case, and you gotta put your mind back in the year 1901 and figure out what were the common terminology of the day.
Well, Pete, defending that language is a little bit like trying to defend incest. It's an uphill fight. But to look at it another way, all of those colonies had been governed by Spain. Spain operates on the civil law system, the so-called Roman law system. No juries in a civil law system. So when you're talking Anglo-Saxon, you're talking Anglo-American law, which we've had jury trials, et cetera, and it's really much different from the civil law system. So to say that in Puerto Rico or the Philippines, okay, starting tomorrow now, whatever you know about the law, forget it, because that isn't going to be the law anymore. That might not have worked so well, but you can't explain that nowadays because of presentism. And then my reading, I've studied that language in there, and Monday I'm going to lay it out very clearly. The quote that everybody likes to trot out, what I call the alien races quote, the Ann Hattori quote, starts out with the word if, meaning that it is hypothetical. So as Brown was just making his arguments, he was saying that, you know, we probably want to be an imperial country, but if the Constitution attaches to every new territorial conquest we make, that might not work out so well because of that language. So he's saying in the future, he's not saying about alien races, he's not hanging that on the 4 islands that the United States took from Spain. But that isn't as much fun as saying, well, the insular cases are racist. So that's why I always say, no, if that's why you're saying the insular cases are racist, you're wrong. Imperialistic, yes. Racist, no. But you and I both understand the benefits of Downs, correct?
Oh, to a great degree. And like I said, I think that they missed an opportunity to use that as an angle in the Davis case. You know, I followed it not too closely, but I don't think that that's an argument that they used, like what the CNMI did with defending Article 12.
Exactly. And I've said before, they wanted answers to all of the questions they don't care about. They wanted to finesse it. Arguments like, well, it's not really an election, and you know, really technical lawyer type arguments.
Yeah. And Davis's lawyer, like I said, framed it he took a law, a statute, an amendment, and a statute that was originally used to protect African-American citizens in the U.S. that was being, denied equal access to the polls, and he used it and he turned it around on us, and he burned our house down.
But what our folks should have done, they should have advanced the argument, that we hear every day on talk radio, that the United States took over a people called Chamorro, that the insular cases, making the argument that you made, the insular cases recognize that there should be different treatments for those folks than for people in the 50 states, and therefore that kind of plebiscite would fit, just like Wobble versus Villa Crucis.
We missed the opportunity to use the insular cases to insulate us from the other, from the 14th Amendment and from the voting rights statute, So insular in the insular cases means islands, but we could have used it and used the other definition and insulated ourselves from that kind of attack like the CNMI did.
Good play on words, Pete. Thanks for bringing that up.
All right. Have a great weekend, Uncle Bob.
Thanks, Pete. Okay, I've got one more testimony, and I've saved the best for last. This is a guy named Dr. Peter S. Watson, and he doesn't pull a Tina. He doesn't tell you much about himself. So I don't know what his credentials are, but this is what he said. In the American system of constitutional federalism, the traditional remedies for anti-democratic, discriminatory, unjust, or otherwise aggrieved outcomes under federal law are well understood. For a number of years, this witness exercised quasi-judicial power when a member of the congressionally established mandated International Trade Commission. Our decisions, therefore, being subject to judicial review, including up to the Supreme Court, which indeed has overturned the same. This witness, accordingly, has firsthand experience and no minor ego bruising arising from dueling with the congressional and judicial branches in the process testing their respective constitutional roles and limits, including relative to each other. And in no small part is it this personal frame of reference that I place over the proposed resolution to discern how it fits relative to federal court jurisdiction and vice versa. In brief, House Resolution 279 exemplifies circumstances in which Congress would seek to exercise its powers to redress grievances arising from a statute and or the Constitution, but not by enactment of corrective remedial statute under Article 1, that's the legislative part of the Constitution, which in the case of territories is also an exercise of Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, the territorial clause, nor does House Resolution 279 propose, where otherwise necessary, a corrective remedial amendment to the Constitution under Article 5. House Resolution 279 is in lieu of a statute that would extend SSI or Medicare, Medicaid in the territories as the same basis as the states. Likewise, House Resolution 279 is in lieu of a statute repealing all federal laws since 1901, ratifying or based on the Insular Cases Unincorporated Territory Doctrine. Moreover, nor is Resolution 279 a proposed Article 5 amendment to extend to Americans in the territories federal voting rights for full and equal representation in the Congress and the Electoral College. It tells us everything that it's not. Instead, 279 would seek by an act of Congress to restrain or even restrict the President and the courts from relying upon the insular cases, which currently are controlling federal court decisional law, jurisprudence which is legally authoritative, that is to say, the supreme law of the land. Some commentators refer to a proposal like 279 as a congressional override of court-made law. But court rulings overridden by Congress generally involve court orders interpreting an act of Congress where the statute or the court interpretation is flawed. 279 is not that. One reason is that 279 must be understood as a congressional endorsement of remedies sought by the plaintiffs in Vielo, Madero, Pena Martez, and Schaller cases. That's those SSI cases, challenging the insular cases. That language is confirmed that by the March 10, 2021 letter from the leadership and members of this committee asking the Attorney General to abandon insular case defense in those cases. Now, they wrote to the Attorney General of the United States saying on these 3 SSI cases that are pending, including the Schaller case, please don't use the insular cases as a defense. All in the name of separation of powers, right? However, as a proposed congressional override, 279 is not aimed at a flaw in the SSI statute as it applies to the states. It is aimed at the constitutionality of the insular cases unincorporated territory doctrine as court-made law allowing Congress to apply federal statutes to non-incorporated territories differently than in states. Now, he doesn't mention this in his written testimony, but in his oral testimony, he says, you can't just say insular cases. You know, nobody's going to know what you're talking about. You know, you say Downs versus Bidwell, 48, USC, et cetera, right? And you cite them, you name them and you cite them. The insular cases. HR, as you were, Resolution 279 is not aimed at a flaw in the SSI statute as it applies in the states. It's aimed at the constitutionality of their insular cases unincorporated territory doctrine as a court-made law allowing Congress to apply federal statutes to non-incorporated territories differently than in states. As such, House Resolution 279 would seek to deprive the president and federal courts of reliance on the insular cases as applicable under the rule of law as it existed when those lawsuits began. The result would be that these three plaintiffs would likely prevail, but that would be in the nature of a statutory remedy for a statutory injury. There is another case in the federal appellate process, and this is another one, Samoa, this is another Keneal Weir case, FTC Manu versus the United States, that is a constitutional claim that the national citizenship, half of the national and state citizenship clause in Section 1 of the 14th Amendment applies in American Samoa as it applies in the states of the Union and territories joined permanently in union with the United States. In the Northwest Ordinance tradition, and under insular cases, permanent union means incorporation and equality under the Constitution, except that full equality still comes only with voting rights. It comes with statehood. Accordingly, if House Resolution 279 is adopted and has its expressly stated impact, and the U.S. Department of Justice abandons an insular case defense, leading to a ruling upholding the trial court decision extending the 14th Amendment to all 5 current territories, here's what that might mean. All current unincorporated territories permanently incorporated into union without self-determination or statutory action by elected representatives. Incorporated. Uniformity clause, taxation, equal protection, due process, all federal law applies as in states and incorporated territories. Now you're hearing a really smart guy say the same thing that I said. So you know I didn't just make it up, right? Guam, U.S. Virgin Islands, American Samoa joined Puerto Rico CNMI removal from UN list of non-self-governing territories with the right of independence. That's what it means, what happened. No more independence, no more self-determination. All of that stuff is gone. And there's this scholarly guy coming along and telling you. In close, most fundamentally of all, the immediately preceding scenario would leave territories in a judicially determined status which would not secure a congressional commitment to full equality through statehood, nor in the alternative independent nationhood, based on democratic self-determination, obviously the very basis upon which our founding constitutional fabric was. So all these guys are asking for what they don't want, is what it comes down to. It's really ironic. Yeah, so, once again, if, oh yeah, and I was going to show you how to put the insular cases away forever by changing one word. I'm looking at 48 United States Code, Section 1421B. Oh, wait a minute, I'm looking at the wrong section here. I'm 1421A, unincorporated territory, and here's how it reads. Guam is declared to be an unincorporated territory of the United States with the capital and seat of government thereof shall be located in the city of Agana, Guam. That's 1421A of the Organic Act. And I promised that I would show you how by deleting one syllable we could take the insular cases out of the game. Here's how you would do it. You would take the UN, the un, off the word incorporated. So that sentence would read like this. Guam is declared to be an incorporated territory of the United States, and the capital and seat of government shall thereof be located at the city of Agana. That's all you'd have to do. Because, Guam was not a territory before 1950. It became a territory in 1950, not because of the insular cases, but because of Congress. Congress said, BAP, you're a territory. You're an unincorporated territory. But if you changed unincorporated to incorporated, then the Constitution applies of its own force, the whole Constitution, including the revenue clauses. No more self-determination, no more independence, no more mirror image taxation, etc. And you look at what American Samoa is able to carve out for itself. They control their own immigration. They control their own customs. They can have a prayer day. What we have here is, some educated people who are looking for something to bitch about. And the first time they find something to bitch about, they stop. They stop the thought process. So this whole idea of overruling the the insular cases, Downs versus Bidwell, is a colossally stupid idea. You can't look at it any other way. But of course, the magic word is incorporated in everybody's argument except mine, right? In 2021, if you can't use the word racism to justify your argument, forget it. The runner tries to steal home from third base, right? And and he's really fast, and the pitch was way outside. The catcher had to step way far to his right in order to catch the ball with his left hand. So the runner comes sliding in. The catcher turns around and dives at the runner and tags at him, right? And the runner and the umpire says, safe. What does the catcher say? You're a racist. He was out. I tagged him. You're just saying he was safe because he is a BIPOC, and I'm not. You're a racist, umpire. Any argument that you have, if you can't inject the word racism into it, you aren't going to have much chance of winning that argument. Okay, I got to go to Churchill Downs, and let me see who I'm going to be talking to after our Carl after Churchill Downs.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Busy week? Mescla Bistro in Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Here we are, Churchill Downs, a home stretch at Tall Tales. I've got our Carl on the line and another Joe wanting to bat cleanup hitter. I hope he doesn't want to tell us about the public hearing on Bill 103 that occurred this morning, because we already know when it was, but we'll see when we get to him. Good afternoon, our Carl, most dangerous man in the room.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob. I've got a question for you. It's really very interesting what you're talking about with American Samoa. They really took a very different route than most of the territories. I believe Guam voluntarily chose to pursue the path of citizenship and become an unincorporated territory. I don't understand what was the benefit to that Samoa understood that caused them to pursue that? Because to me, citizenship and the things that come with an unincorporated territory are pretty positive. There's some downsides, I guess, but I don't understand what foresight did they see that said, this is, and they've kept it. They have no interest in changing the relationship. What are they getting out of it?
Well, as the lieutenant governor explained, they have a Congress, a representative body, the upper house of which is either consists of chiefs or people appointed by people chosen by chiefs, traditional leaders. You can't own land in Samoa unless you're a Samoan. They have what's called the prayer curfew, all things that wouldn't go under the U.S. Constitution. So the thinking is that since the people in American Samoa are not are not citizens, and Samoa is an unincorporated territory, as usual, the Constitution does not apply ex proprio vigere there. So things that wouldn't pass constitutional muster in any of the states do pass constitutional muster there. Then as far as citizenship is concerned, if you are a national, you can come and go to the United States freely. And if you're overseas, if you're in France and you lose your passport, you're entitled to U.S. consular service. So what you can't do as a non-citizen, as a person, now you can't vote in any of the state elections, but that's only been the case since 1924. There was a time in our history when you didn't have to be a citizen to vote. So non-citizens aren't able to vote, and there are certain employments in the federal government that require citizenship. And you can't be an officer in the armed forces. But it's not that great a disability, because if you read the Constitution, the word citizen doesn't come up very often. The word person is the focus in most of the Bill of Rights.
That's very interesting. It was part of their motivation too that they just wanted to have, have a relationship with a military power in case that was necessary, or.
Well, in 1900, the Brits and the Germans were close to going to war over the two Samoas. And I don't remember exactly what the details were, but I think the Brits stood aside and allowed the Samoan chiefs to cede the island of Tutuila to the U.S. And Savai'i, and I can't remember the name of the other island in what we used to call Western Samoa, and if we just call it Samoa now, went to the Germans. But of course, after World War I, the Germans lost everything to the Brits. The Brits let the Kiwis administer it for quite some time, up until somewhere in the 60s, I think, when it became an independent country.
Okay, well, thanks for clarifying that, Bob. I just find that very interesting that the way they pursued the relationship with America is quite unique, and I'm glad you brought it up. I did not know anything about that until you brought it up on this show and past shows. So
yeah, well, I've said over and over again that the insular cases are our best friend. We're not making the maximum use out of it, but the last thing we would want is for the Supreme Court to overrule Downs, because if it overrules Downs, it has to say the United States is a part, Guam is not a pertinent, but it is a part of the United States, and the whole Constitution applies immediately. Now the smart guy over there is saying, oh, yeah, then we get to vote. No, we wouldn't get to vote, but we would get to pay U.S. income tax. We would get to go without the Section 30 money, on and on and on, So it's dumb to ask that the insular cases be overruled.
Yeah, it's like a crowd, everyone rah, 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 and heading us off the cliff.
Yeah, and of course, the easy answer is, well, if you're in favor of the insular cases, then you must be a racist. And we would do anything to avoid being called a racist, right?
Yeah. Okay, Bob. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, Carl. Always a pleasure. See you later. The most dangerous man in the room. But another Joe was fearless. He sat right there in the green room with the most dangerous man in that green room, and he didn't miss a beat.
Survived.
Right? You survived, right, another Joe?
I survived it.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Bob, so it sounds like, to me, it sounds like what you're saying is a bunch of supposed very intelligent people found something to complain about and then proved that they were other than intelligent, that they either intentionally or unintentionally shot themselves.
Exactly.
Because, in fact, being unincorporated is an advantage.
Exactly.
Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if these, what would you call them, separatists, continue to pursue, there's going to be no choice. Becoming incorporated, either will become incorporated as, but then again, there's no possibility of statehood because of the population is too small, and
so we'd be in incorporated territory forever, and anybody who thought there should be an independent Guam, out of luck. SOL, as the saying goes.
So like I was saying earlier, they basically they were attempting to shoot themselves and everyone around them.
Yeah, they were shooting at the insular cases, but instead they hit themselves in the foot.
There you go. So, like you said, the best thing to do is to make the best use of this opportunity while we can, until some unforeseen scenario occurs where it's not as advantageous. But real quick, Kabab, because I know there's not much time left. I'm thinking that they're taking advantage of this wariness due to I listened to the elders talk about how it seemed a lot of people were evacuated before the Japanese invasion, but our elders were kind of left here, and so they got a question as to what happened there. But beyond that, I mean, my elders are all really thankful that that Americans came back and we were liberated, and they valued becoming U.S. citizens. I don't know what they were before. Were they U.S. nationals before they became U.S. citizens?
Yes. Yeah, my wife was a U.S. national for 10 years before she became a citizen.
Yeah, but I like this fact checking, Uncle Bob, and I think we need to call all these separatists on this issue and say, I mean, even look at Carl Gutierrez. He said, hey, there's a lot of things we can take advantage of being in unincorporated territory. But so I want to thank you for your letting me have the time to agree with you. And by the way, Bob, they have the public hearing for Bill 103-36. The concern is tele-abortion. And so it's left open. They're in recess with regard to the issue, and they're going to let the pro-life, anti-abortion ladies know what their next step is going to be. Tina Winya Barnes said this when they developed this bill.
I saw a couple of the anti-abortion ladies, and they did a really good job. I watched that on TV, and they did a really good job. Barnes, though, of course, doesn't like openness. She wants secret meetings. She wants to shut people down. She wants to lock them out of the hall, etc. Got to go, another Joe. See you next week.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Take care.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam. 93.3 FM, and 104.3 HD3.
Really losing the masks? I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News.
This is a great day for America.
President Biden reacting as the Centers for Disease Control revises its guidance to say Americans can stop wearing face masks most of the time if they've been fully vaccinated.
The president highlighted the new guidance without a mask in the White House Rose Garden, hailing a major milestone in the fight against the coronavirus.
It's been made possible by the extraordinary success we've had in vaccinating so many Americans so quickly.
The CDC guidance still calls for fully vaccinated people to wear masks in some indoor settings like buses, planes, and hospitals. More than 117 million Americans are fully vaccinated.
Fox's Jared Halperin. White House coronavirus advisor Dr. Anthony Fauci says some people will choose to continue to wear masks.
There are those people who don't want to take that bit of a risk, and there's nothing wrong with that, and they shouldn't be criticized.
Israel is massing troops along the Gaza Strip, preparing for a possible invasion of territory ruled by Hamas. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken.
We've been very clear that rocket attacks must cease. We've been very clear about Israel's right to defend itself.
But the secretary also said Palestinians have the right to live in peace. Egyptian negotiators are trying to mediate a ceasefire. In Texas, lawmakers have voted to ban abortion once an embryonic heartbeat is detected. That bill heads to Governor Greg Abbott, who is expected to sign it despite almost certain court challenges. But proponents say this bill is different, as violations of it would be civil rather than criminal offenses. Providence, Rhode Island, 9 people have been shot, 3 of them critically, in a shootout between rival groups. The police chief says the suspects and the victims might be one and the same. Wall Street up Thursday, the Dow gaining 433 points. Asian markets closing Friday higher, and Dow futures are up nearly 150 points. America is listening to Fox News.
Connect to Fox News Audio on the Fox News app. Listen to hear your favorite hosts like Brian Kilmeade, Jimmy Fallon,